Okay. Well, hi. I'm really glad you guys could make it from the comfort of your couch and or desk chair or wherever it is. I hope you are comfortable. Grab yourself a little something to drink, maybe a snack, lean back. Um, I'm gonna make sure I save some time for you guys to ask questions and maybe even have some discussion. Um, So my name is Margo Memmott. I work at Broadbent and Associates. I'm based here in Reno, Nevada. Here for me, not for all of you. The title of the paper is Those Who Live in Between Historic Period Paiute Village Sites in Virginia City. I will be sharing a bunch of photographs of Virginia City that I know a lot of you have already seen before, but I'm hoping that when we get to the end of this presentation, you will be looking at some of these photographs a little bit differently. And I'm also hoping that at the end of the presentation, that we're all going to come away with a little greater appreciation of the perseverance of Native Americans, specifically the Numu, the Northern Paiute up in Virginia City. But right out of the gate, I want to be clear, it's not the Northern Paiute were not the only Native Americans in Virginia City. Virginia City was very cosmopolitan. So regional tribal folks from all over the area could have easily been up there as well. And the Washoe are right there too. So just know that there are a lot of different Native Americans who absolutely spent time in historic Virginia City. But hopefully what everyone can get out of this is sort of a sense of um, the perseverance of the Native Americans in this region, and maybe come away with a little different way of looking at historical records and trying to understand Native American history. Too much of the time, archaeologists like to do it, as my friend Stuart says, the hard way, just through excavation and digging things up. Sometimes you can use things like historic photographs and archives and oral history and ethnography and a lot of other ways of knowing and understanding history outside of trying to understand people through archaeological means, by studying the stuff that people used and have left behind. So that's where we're going with this. Before I get too deep into all of that, I want to give you a little background. So let me make sure I'm doing this right. Yay, okay, progress, here we go. I'm going to start with something a few of you who already know me are going to be quite aware of. Even a couple of people here helped me on this excavation. Oh, it was back in 2001. I was a graduate student at University of Nevada, Reno, studying under Don Hardesty. This is a bunch of the volunteers, specifically the all I can think of is Army Corps, which is not it at all. I apologize. AmeriCorps volunteers, and that's who most of these are. Also, Elise Jolly, who some of you may recognize from Nevada SHPO, now at Nevada State Parks. And at any rate, that's my crew. We're really dirty. We're underneath Piper's Opera House and we're doing excavations. The opera house we excavated is the one in the photograph next to it. That one was built in 1878. It burned down in 1883. And the opera house that you might see in Virginia City today was built in 1885 over those ruins of the 1878 opera house. And that's why we're so filthy in the picture and covered in soot, and because we were excavating a burned down building. So that was my initial introduction to Virginia City history. That's kind of how I started all of this. All right, so if you're a good student, you read everything you can to help give yourself context. So there's a whole bunch of stuff on Virginia City out there. Everyone from Mark Twain to Ron James is published on the subject of Virginia City. A litany of graduate students, including myself, have completed archaeological excavations. There's a lot of popular culture stuff, like these guys that just popped up. Everything from Bonanza in 1959 to an earlier movie, Virginia City, which the big opening for it was hosted in Piper's Opera House. And it's interesting too. It's like Errol Flynn, Miriam Hopkins, Humphrey Bogart, Louis L'Amour wrote about the Comstock, of course, Mark Twain, as we've already mentioned, and more recent things like Janice Oberding writing about ghost hunters. Ron James's Roar in the Silence is a book I highly recommend if you want to just generally learn more about Virginia City and some of its history. And it's kind of this history that really very much focuses on mining and the people who settled Virginia City after gold and silver were discovered up there. And of course, the pop culture Hollywood version is all about, Wild West, gunslingers, saloons, cowboys, that kind of a thing. And so that's sort of this background of all of this information about Virginia City. It's there's lots of archives, lots of photographs, lots of documents, a lot of information out there. So I suppose I probably shouldn't have been surprised when a few years ago, a colleague of mine at the Society for Historical Archaeology conference, I ran into her in, I think it was like New Orleans, but at any rate, I ran into her, and after a few moments of kind of getting caught up and that, we asked each other what we're working on, and then she was like, "Are you still working in Virginia City?" And before I could even respond, she blurted out that surely everything that can be studied up there has already been done. And I was like, oh, well, rude. But at any rate, she does kind of make a good point, because there is a lot that has been done. I would say that there are a lot of things that have not been done, and I'm endeavoring to do a little bit of that today and present to you some things that I think really could use a lot more attention. Specifically, I would like to get a little more information about out there and more knowledge about what the Northern Paiute were up to in Virginia City. So I mentioned earlier that I had done the excavations on Piper's Opera House. So initially, back in 2001, through when I finished my master's thesis in 2004 and graduated, my understanding of Native Americans on the Comstock was very limited. I knew from Ron James and his research that the census data showed that there were Native Americans that got picked up in the census, not really named by name, but kind of counted in Virginia City and Gold Hill. I knew that there were pine nuts in my Piper's Opera House collection. We found a number of food items in there from the audience goers sitting in the opera house and eating while watching burlesque or a bear fight or opera or Shakespeare or some sort of poetry reading or something, and they would eat things like peanuts and popcorn, but also pine nuts. So pine nuts existed there in the Piper's Opera House. So that's one sort of point that I touched on early on with Native Americans on the Comstock. Also, there are lots of newspaper clippings, newspaper articles, and announcements and information out there about who appeared in Piper's Opera House. And Sarah Winnemucca was one of the people who went to the Opera House early on, and it may have been, pardon me, McGuire's Opera House, where she actually spoke, which was the first version of Piper's. And its original name was McGuire's, and it became Piper's. But at any rate, Sarah Winnemucca had been a featured speaker there and was speaking on the behalf of Native American rights. And of course, is famously wrote a book and is Nevada's featured in statue form in DC as one of Nevada's two statues representing our state. So this is Sarah Winnemucca, of course. And that was sort of the limits of my understanding in Virginia City of what the Paiute were up to outside of one thing. And that is Jean Hattori's dissertation. It is a dissertation, right? Yes, from 1975. Jean Hattori did some work up there and did some excavations. And that was pretty much it. There was not a whole lot more that I understood about what was going on in Virginia City in terms of what Native Americans were up to up there. I knew from Jean Hattori's work that that the Paiute had been up there, that they ate domesticated animals, wild game, fruit, and pine nuts again. They used materials that they found, bought, and or traded from the European intruders. They built houses that were similar to their traditional houses, but they made them from discarded materials like pipe, metal, and canvas. So this is an example of one of those kinds of buildings that were constructed. It's very much sort of in that wiki-up shape, but made with materials that were on hand. This photo dates to 1947. It's from Eastman Studios. There's a really nice archive of photos from Eastman at UC Davis. You can see them online. There are a whole bunch more of these photographs from Virginia City that include a number of them of some Native American buildings from about 1947. So, okay. So there are a number of oral histories, ethnographies, and tribal members all confirm that this is in part Northern Paiute territory on the eastern slopes of Mount Davidson, where Virginia City ended up being. So we're up in the Virginia Range. There's numerous ethnographies. The Virginia Range used to be forested, really well forested, with pinyon and juniper trees, and it used to be a very important location for pine nut harvesting, again with the pine nuts. This was in the ethnographic summaries. They also confirmed that there were a number of other important plants and animals in the Virginia Range, and that the Paiute were absolutely confirmed to be up in this area. And not that you need me to confirm that, but there you go. This is an interesting page from sort of a photo album, and that's just sort of this collage of Native Americans, specifically they say Paiute of Nevada. And this is down here at the bottom. I don't know if you can see my cursor. This is one of the structures from one of the primary sites that I spent time looking at up in Virginia City that is the subject that we're talking about here today. So again, you can see that domed building in the background. There's a mine dump, a little ore cart track right there. And of course, a small child, a grown man, a little door, and some other materials and goods surrounding them, and other people more in studio poses. All right. continuing with a little bit of background, I think a lot of you probably are quite familiar with Nevada history. Otherwise, you probably wouldn't be here. So I'll keep this pretty short and sweet. But Virginia City is the community that's at the center of the Comstock Mining District. This is where the rich silver ores were famously first discovered in 1859. That discovery, of course, launched the massive rush of outsiders to the slopes of Mount Davidson and, of course, the surrounding region and really across Nevada. The initial rush was followed by the Pyramid Lake War in 1860. And then the US government established the Nevada Territory in 1861. The US Congress then made Nevada a state in 1863. So in just a short 4 years, huge changes happened on the slopes of Mount Davidson. And I think this image is really good at sort of providing an example of this city that just sort of popped up all at once. So in 1863, it's estimated that there were about 15,000 residents, not including Native Americans, because they never liked to count the native residents of the region. But there were about 15,000 residents. And to give you sort of a sense of scale or numbers, right now, Virginia City is somewhere around 800 people. So it was quite a bit higher number, a much higher number of residents in 1863 versus today. And that wasn't even the peak number of people in Virginia City. That didn't happen until about 1875. And there's a lot of variation in those estimates, but it's probably around 30, maybe 40,000. There's various estimates for that. All right. So there's some of that history, that background, and with that onslaught of people coming up onto Mount Davidson, what happened? What happened to the Northern Paiute? We know they didn't just go away. They continued to live there, and they kind of mixed in and found ways of surviving regardless of this dramatic shift. So you can see a group of Native Americans kind of gathered together. It looks like it's in cooler months. People are wearing coats and blankets. There are two women in the background along the railroad tracks. That's the Virginia and Truckee Railroad in the background there. You see the stacks. I'm kind of pointing. So this is the CNC shaft house. And this is Pierce's, or otherwise known as the Virginia and Truckee Railway. It's a train station building. This is the freight house. That's what I was looking for. Thanks for your patience with me. It's Friday. Hey, what can I say? It's day 13 of work, so. All right, so we know that they're up there. You get these photos from time to time. Jean Hattori goes on to write a little bit more in a number of publications about Native Americans and what they were up to in Virginia City. And of course, we got the census records. There's some information there, but it's not a lot going on explaining what's happening. So I'm going to turn a little to archaeology and sort of the subject of my presentation and its focus. So back in, what was it, 2013, I initially had a project in Virginia City helping with the sewer treatment facility expansion. They were replacing all the sewer systems that dated back to the 1930s. And in doing that, there was this right-of-way, which you can see in this picture, that needed to be surveyed. And it's intersecting a village site, and that would be 26ST007. So that's when this site was first sort of initially recorded as an archaeological site. And I had just started at Broadbent and Associates. It was about 13 years ago that I first saw this, and I wasn't exactly sure what I was recording. What I saw at first, it took me a moment, but if it were not for Gene Hattori and had some conversations with him early on when I first started researching and preparing to do the fieldwork, I might not have recognized what I saw, because this is what I was looking at, and it's just brush, some trees. This is the waste dump. And then there's just this material here. And then we're looking at a railroad berm that I'm standing on to take this photo. But it was much more than that. You can see from the 2010s to the I believe this was the 1880s when this photo was taken. It's an entire neighborhood or village. So if you count them up, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's at least 11 buildings depicted in this image. And then on the other side of the tracks, I know because of recording the site, there were a number of other buildings up there. So there were quite a few buildings that used to be there. You can see the little stacks, little chimneys, materials, doors, canvas. The buildings are not all domed. Some of them are gabled, like this one too. So there's a range of things going on here, and some of them are different sizes. This one's much smaller. These two are larger. So there's some variation in what's going on. And you can tell immediately they're not made from willow and tule and brush. They're made from canvas and wire and pipe and found materials. This is another image of the same site, but as I had mentioned, there were some other buildings. Most of these ones are completely obliterated. There's houses built where some of these used to be. But what I love about this image is, I keep bringing up pine nuts. I'm not sure what exactly this is. I'm guessing this is probably kindling or firewood bundles. There's some other sort of bundles or bags over here. So newspaper articles indicate that the Paiute were up there selling kindling and firewood, but also pine nuts. And that comes up from time to time in newspaper articles, and that it gets mentioned here and there. So this looks to be sort of potentially what that is in these images are like firewood or kindling. You can also see a little shade kind of structure off the front of this building. Another domed structure there, a couple of people hanging out. A horse over here. So there's quite a bit happening here. They're not just here for a moment. They've really settled in. That's why I'm using the word village rather than camp. Let me see. Come on, picture. Okay. So maybe there's a few of you out there who are feeling a little skeptical. Sure. How do you know it was actually, Native Americans doing this? Well, Margaret Wheat put out a book, and in her book, she's got some fantastic photos. And she worked closely with a number of Native Americans, specifically Northern Paiute. And I'm going to be terrible right now. I cannot for the life of me remember everybody's names, but I know that Woosie George was an important informant for Margaret Wheat. But there are a number of other people who were also very important informants for her. But what was really cool is they agreed to work with Maggie or Margaret Wheat, and she photographed them building Native American houses or Paiute houses. And this is how they put them together. You can see they're using more traditional materials. And then here on this other side is the metal pipe and the wire and the sheet metal, pounded out cans, different things like that. But you can see that the method is the same. The materials are different. Here's another image, same idea. You can see the cross hatching and also the cross hatching here. And where the bars cross, it's tied together or lashed together with wire. And over here, they're using rags. You can see the tule. And of course here, metal. On the inside of the structure, what's really cool on the one in Virginia City, the inside is lined with newspaper, and the newspaper has some dates, like from the 19 teens, 1930s. And here are 4 different views of one collapsed building at that site. So it kind of gives you sort of a 360-degree sense of how it was constructed. And it is collapsed, sadly. There are a number of artifacts kicking around the site. All of the artifacts that I was able to record all date between the 1880s and the 1930s. They're not dating earlier, and they're not dating later than that. That's pretty strong indicator there. There's also a Chinese coin. Most of the artifacts are what archaeologists would call historic artifacts or non-Native American artifacts. Go figure, it's the time period. I did also observe some shell, specifically abalone shell, that had been shaped. And that every time that I go up there and I check on the site, I make sure it's still sort of tucked away where it's always been. And last time I checked, it was still there, and please leave it alone. So you probably wouldn't be able to find it, and I don't want you to. So that said, these things are in plain sight. And I didn't know it for a long time. So this first photo over here, zoomed out, I'd looked at it a lot of times because Piper's Opera House is in it over here. And then one day I was looking at it after I'd recorded that site, and I'm like, oh, wait, I know where I need to look. And so I zoomed in, and I got, in this picture, you can see right in here, come on, do the thing. I think it's working. There it goes. It's supposed to be an arrow to help. But you can see that site. This is the railroad. So there it is again. So that was kind of fun to figure out that there's information. It's always been there. I just never noticed it before. Here's another one. Yes.
So, because there's this question kind of applies to what you were just talking about. What is a good source for identifying where these encampments were located? Sarah, who was here, she said that she found some modified wine bottle glass at one of their sites.
Oh, right.
But
because
they
I know
didn't
she's done work up there.
Yeah. So, but they didn't see it recorded in Nevcris, so she's trying to figure out where we might be able to find that.
And yeah, that's it. Nevcris. There's not a lot of other information out there in terms of archaeology of where these things are going to be. There is a little bit out there from some student research that you might be able to find some more information through UNR at their museum and their collections, because Don Hardisty's students did some work like on the Chinatown area. But so the excavations are mostly housed with UNR. Like my master's thesis excavation is there. And what else? Jessica Axum's on Chinatown. as well as Kelly Dixon's with the Boston Saloon and that. So there is some information there, but there isn't a lot else out there. It's not something that's really been looked at very much. And that's part of why we're here where we're at. So yeah. And also, Sarah, feel free to reach out and we can chat more too. I wanted to point out along those lines, like where and stuff. So this one, you can see the little site up above, up here, just on the other side of the fence. And this is the Gould and Curry mine, which I'm guessing this site is completely wiped out, but I don't know because this would have been in the middle of town today. So, but again, they're kind of in plain sight. Some of the archival evidence of the Paiute being in historical Virginia City. This is another image. I'll give you a second to look at it, but this is the Fourth Ward School, for those of you familiar with Virginia City. And right there, we've got a couple of little wiki-ups hanging out on the side there. And again, we'll do this one. Nice overview of Virginia City. Mount Davidson being over here, up here. And that's the zoomed in. But that's where that comes from, is right down there. So a horse, some structures. This one looks abandoned, but this one's probably being lived in at that time. So quite a few different things. This is the, to also help orient you with like important buildings. That's the Mackey mansion. This is the International Hotel over here. I believe, I think I'm getting that right. Here's another one. This is one of the more well-known sort of images of Virginia City. It's the bird's eye. And it has crazy level of accuracy, but there's the zoomed in image. But that, you see the little wiki-up structures, but that's over here, kind of hanging out off to the side. All right. So one of the things that this image, I'm going to go back just a bit so you can kind of see. So we were over here. A lot of these where these little village sites are placed is on the outskirts of town. They're not right in the middle of town. Not that you're surprised. There also seems to be a tendency for them to be situated along the Virginia and Truckee Railroad tracks. The Copper Belt Railroad over in Yerington, there are some historic period Paiute, I don't know about village sites, maybe camps or village sites. They haven't really been looked at very much as well, along where that old railroad grade was. And this is something that comes up repeatedly. I think there's kind of a pattern of these places being out of the way from the big urban centers, but near the railroad. I have to file through that, don't mind me. All right, so we're going to go off into a slightly different direction. I'm going to talk just for a minute about Zora Andrus. She purchased the Nevada Brewery, which is on the road directly down the hill from one of the primary Paiute village sites. She lived in the Nevada Brewery between 1936 and 1959. She's a pretty well-known artist in artist circles. That's her in front of St. Mary of the Mountains Catholic Church with a really extravagant hat. Clearly a person with quite a bit of character. So she lived just down the street from one of the locations of these village sites. And she actually made a painting depicting this. And here's her painting. And this is entitled Paiute Camp in the Snow. She did it in 1953. I'm using this with permission from Bert Badeau, who owns the painting. But it's kind of an abstract version of a sort of a wiki-up site, which is kind of crazy to me. But she described it as abandoned in the 1950s, which makes sense because as far as I can tell, the sites were abandoned in the 1930s. And there are probably a number of reasons for that. One of them is the federal law, the Indian Reorganization Act, that I think is 1936, but also a large effort on the part of the federal government to create sanitary sewer systems and garbage sanitary landfills, and to clean up cities and create and modernize cities so that there was running water, indoor plumbing, sewer systems rather than septic, and also or outhouses even, and also to kind of clean up where garbage is disposed of, because up until that time throughout most of northern Nevada, garbage was just sort of burned in your backyard or sort of informally dumped somewhere in the desert. So that's part of what changed in terms of why these camps started going away. So people were being forced to move on to reservations, and they were also being forced out of the area if they didn't go onto the reservations in the name of sanitation, because a lot of sanitation rules and ordinances were being passed. And so health departments and municipalities with health departments were pushing people who were living in these village sites out of the areas. So that's what my sort of best as I can tell information is what's going on and why these places were then abandoned. Finally, and it's Lindsay says she'll be right back, but I'll introduce you to her in a minute and maybe she'll be able to speak when we open up questions. I wanted to share with you, because it is a little bit of, there's a lot of struggle and perseverance that is sort of captured in this subject. But one of the things that I made a point of after I recorded that first site was the site is primarily on private land, except for that right of way. So I kept working with different people to try to find a way to get it to be preserved. And the landowners wanted to sell. They didn't want to destroy these buildings necessarily. They didn't really care one way or the other. They were sort of ambivalent. And that's where Lindsay steps in. So a few years ago, Lindsay Lafayette became the regional director for the Archaeological Conservancy. And she and I were going to a fundraiser for the Fourth Ward School Museum up in Virginia City. And she was asking me, so do you know of any archaeological sites that maybe the Conservancy should be made aware of that might need to be protected, or that the landowner would be interested in working with us, and maybe we could purchase it for protection. So this is the first one. This is a Native American constructed building over near that village site. And they purchased that initially. And then just last year, they were able to purchase the village site, 2 lots. So the majority of the village site that hasn't already been destroyed by the past 10 years of houses being built. So part of that site had been destroyed by houses being built, but what remains has mostly been purchased by the Archaeological Conservancy. I know that Lindsay's been reaching out to tribal members and has done a tour with some tribal elders and some youth to go look at the site and to view what's out there and discuss some ideas on what should be done to take care of and be proper stewards of this location. So I put Lindsay's email address up there because she's always on the lookout for opportunities to preserve on private land, because there are no laws in Nevada that preserve private land archaeology. And there are currently only limited laws, like what I work under as an archaeologist. Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act is how I found this site, because of the requirements for that. But that act only protects, it doesn't really necessarily protect, but it requires consideration of these historic places under that federal law. And so if it weren't for the Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act, this location would probably already be completely gone. And we were able to do something about it. At any rate, so wanted to give props to laws that actually do help. Finally, I want to thank you guys for showing up. And like I promised, I wanted to give a pretty good amount of time for discussion, questions, corrections on if I've gotten something wrong, all of those things. So thank you very much. And I wanted to end with this photograph of pinyon pines overlooking Virginia City and Mount Davidson. Yeah, some references.
All right.
Anyway, how do I get out of here?
Stop sharing.
There we go.
I promoted Lindsay, so Lindsay, you can actually use your mic if you want to.
Okay.
To answer questions as well. And then the questions will be in the chat. So if you guys want to look at
I'm gonna open the chat on my side. Oh wow. Okay, so yeah, Sarah Hefner. And again, I already sort of addressed it. These encampments aren't very well documented. I've been digging around, not literally digging, like archivally digging. Sorry, I should be clear about that. Archivally digging around to try to identify where they are, so that they can have a chance at not being lost. Because honestly, to the untrained eye, if people don't know, or there are some people who actually are still living and with us who remember these places being occupied. If you do the math, they're quite old. But a number of tribal elders have also informed myself and Lindsay that these places are that they had heard about these places from like a grandfather or a grandmother or an auntie. So they're not gone from memory, and I hope to keep it that way. So let me see. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment, offer a correction, ask a question? Feel free to throw that out there. Thank you.
I have a question actually.
Yeah,
so
Sam.
Is there anything that you can find uniquely there that might be able to indicate that there was something like that? Or is it mostly like if you're looking through photos and stuff like that, that's how you're going to find it?
I think what's unique, one of the best places to have an understanding of what should be there is probably Jean Hattori's thesis work from 1975, because that really gives a good, clear definition of what archaeologically should be and could be there.
Okay.
It's always going to be dominated by historic artifacts. I'm using quotes. I don't know if you can see my air quotes, because yeah. but there it will be artifacts too that are being used, maybe like Euro-American artifacts, but they're being used by Native Americans in ways that are useful to them rather than what is considered useful to a German immigrant, for example. So things sometimes get modified or used in different ways. And I think the binding or lashing together of pipes and building materials are a giveaway. And also things like abalone shell and olivella shell, things that are very prized and important, that would be held on to and curated for longer periods of time by tribal families that maybe were intentionally left behind or lost and left behind, might be there as well. I also want to caution when you go to visit these sites, be a good listener, and anyone who's out there who isn't sort of already coached on context and the importance of not removing something from where it was placed or left behind by the person who used it. It's very important to leave things where they were found. It's one thing to photograph it and so that you can remember it. So take photographs but leave things behind. It's very, very important because these are very rare and very fragile places, and they're one of the few kinds of sites that really give that evidence of that continuity in like something as famous as the Comstock lode of like Native Americans were there too, for crying out loud. Not just gunslingers and, anyway, the myth of the West. So, okay. Do you think the abalone shell was from trade with coastal Miwok or a different coastal group from Northern California? That's a great question. And I really do not know. There's been research done, like Jeff Smith at UNR has tried to source like the olivella. There's probably a way to do through isotope analysis. So there's probably a way to kind of narrow that down of where the abalone shell is coming from. But I don't know for sure because it could be all along like California coast. So like Miwok could also be coming as far away as like Oregon, because Jeff has identified that some of the olivella has come from potentially as far north as Oregon. So I hope that helps, Joe G. Also, let's see, Vicky. Hi, Vicky. There's a cool assemblage at the Nevada State Museum in Under One Sky exhibit that Hattori put together on VC sites. When we moved to VC, there were several prominent Paiute families. And yeah, there are, I'm terrible with names, but there's one family in particular who's has Paiute ancestry, and they're like also like sixth generation Comstock, because that's always a thing on the Comstock. I've been here 6 generations, which is great. But when you say that to a Native American, it's like, ha ha ha. Sure. So those folks have been up there living on the Comstock since the beginning of the Comstock, but of course predating that in more traditional ways. So there are some families around. I love that continuity. And I wouldn't be surprised if they have like a grandmother or someone, and I haven't had the opportunity to speak with these families. I'd love to if someone wants to hook me up. But and to find out, a little bit more about the individuals who were here. Anything else from anyone? And there are no silly questions. Lindsay, are you out there? I don't know if you're out there, but you can turn your mic on if you are out there. She might have had to go deal with a teenager or
I'm
something. Who
here.
knows?
I'm back.
Oh, there she is. Did
Hi.
you want to give anyone any sort of an update about what the Conservancy has done with these sites? Because I think that might be useful for the handful of folks who are here still.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry I had to step out, so I didn't quite catch what you covered at the
I
end
just
there.
not much. So really anything you say will be an update.
Let's see here. Well, first, I just wanted, before I forget, I'm going to post a link here for a video that we have out there about these
Oh,
wiki,
good.
the first wiki up. Trying to do that here. See what that
Thank
looks
you,
like.
Lindsay.
Ah, there you go. So I think before we leave, if you can copy and paste it to your own browser, that'll work. So we've done a 15-minute video about our first WikiUp acquisition. The second one hadn't been acquired yet at the time that it was being made, but we kind of allude to it because it was in progress towards the end of the video editing. And most recently, well, we've got 2 parcels now with the fallen down WikiUp. We also got the lot that's just to the north of that. So, you know, a little more space there rather than just the very narrow lot that we originally had. So that's good news. And then we are looking into fencing the property. Not that we think, I mean, it's not going to be the kind of fence that would actually keep people out and maybe not all the way, but it would be the kind of fence, because I'm just worried people would just drive their trucks through it or just not even know what it
Yeah.
is and just decide to drive through there or think they want to
Yeah.
clean it up or something like that. So we're looking into
'cause
fencing.
to the untrained eye, I think someone
Yeah.
might think of it
Yeah.
as
I spoke with
garbage
the
if you're not
neighbor
paying
and they
attention.
said they thought it was like a dog cage or something. And I was like, but
Yeah.
I gave them some information in my card.
Yeah.
But yeah, and we're always looking for new acquisitions. And so if you know of any other properties that you see up for sale in Virginia City that we might be interested in, we don't do standing buildings. We can't maintain buildings, but if anything looks, if it's in ruins, we would be interested, or just a lot that, you know, there's an archaeology site there. Yeah, we'd be interested, or anywhere else really in the West. So I'm open to ideas and new
Cool.
acquisitions.
Lindsay, I'm glad that you made it because I know you were juggling some things and I apologize still back at the Great Basin conference. I wasn't able to squeeze the shout out to the Conservancy, and at that time, only 15 minutes. I had an hour tonight. So
Yeah, good job.
yeah, even though it's like yeah, it's a small crowd, but that's good. Anything else, Sam, Samantha?
I
That
think that's about it.
I
So,
think we got everyone.
yeah. I want to thank you both for coming and talking. Thank you, Margo. You've actually sent me out to this site before, like many years ago. So yeah,
Yeah,
I did. Yeah. So it's cool to know that the Conservancy is now taking care of it, because that was one thing. It was very fragile.
yeah. It's so sad. There are 2 of the ruins that now have a house right on top of it, and there's nothing. It just couldn't do anything. So, yeah, it's good to see that Vicky's on here. Hi, Vicky. That's kind of funny. Because I know she's familiar. She lives up there on the Comstock. So anyway. Well, thanks you guys.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I really appreciate the time, and thanks for inviting me, Samantha.
No problem. Thank you for giving the talk, and it was good to see you.